Hi, everyone. I am Alex, and I have Michael Vigorito
Welcome.
with me today. And we are going to talk about our October conference, Out of Control Sexual Behavior. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation and looking
Yeah.
forward to our conference in October.
Yes, so looking forward to that. As I was just telling Michael, I have a client that this is like right on topic for, and I can't wait to learn more about this. And so I hope everyone else is as well. But I'd love to just ask you a handful of questions
Sure.
and do some time with SHA. Okay, so Michael, tell us about yourself and your career. Let's hear
Great.
a little bit of your background. Yeah.
Perfect. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also a certified group psychotherapist and certified sex therapist slash supervisor through ASECT. I provide individual, group, and couples therapy in my private practice in DC. My primary focus is working with men concerned about problematic or out of control sexual behavior. And in those modalities, I primarily work with folks on an individual and group level. So I run two groups. I have a general, what I call sexual health group or an OCSB group. And then I have a group that's more specific, working with gay and bisexual men concerned about sexual health and meth recovery. So kind of a much more narrow section of problematic or out of control sexual behavior. And so that's my clinical practice. And then I have a consulting practice or consulting aspect of my work where I provide sexual health trainings to behavioral health agencies. So I'm helping to integrate sexual health into routine care. And so currently I'm affiliated with University of Maryland's Prevention Research Center, where we are testing a curriculum that I co-designed and developed with Sean Layers, a social worker in Maryland, to train behavioral health providers in providing affirmative care with lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning folks, as well as having a sexual health component within that. So we're kind of in the throes of that research. So we've launched two of the three cohorts. So we're hoping to end the first trial of the research by the end of the year, and hopefully disseminating that curriculum nationally.
Wow, that's all so amazing. So amazing. Yes. So, what inspired you to become a therapist, and more so, what inspired you to become a sex therapist and kind of, find that niche that you were talking about? And what was
Well,
your
it,
there?
it started when I was a sad, depressed, gay college student, trying to get my act together and kind of figure out who I was. And I dragged my sorry butt to the college counseling center to kind of work through some of the issues of coming out for me, and that was kind of my first exposure to therapy. And then in that, I felt inspired by the process and wanting to also help other folks in the community. So I began to focus my education and high school projects and internships all toward working with members of the LGBTQ plus community. And then within that, also when I was a bit of what I called a hypothetical homosexual, I would go to the library in the stacks and kind of reading everything because that's all I was ready to do at the time. I came across a book that was pretty influential for me, which was And the Band Played On. So I got to see how the country responded to the HIV epidemic and how our sex negative biases and the stigmatization of a particular community prevented folks from accessing the care that they needed, and how we increase the suffering of folks needlessly. And that began my desire to work in HIV mental health. And then on that path is actually where I started developing my specialty and working with problematic or out of control sexual behavior, because within that population of folks I was working with, there were folks saying that, despite having one of the, this negative consequence to my behavior, becoming HIV positive, I'm still having difficulty controlling it, or I'm still struggling with regulating it. And it really struck my curiosity. It's like, what is happening here? And so then I turned back to the literature, look for professionals in the community who was working with this population, just kind of clarify what is happening, how it can best help this population. And I realized like this was a particular niche that really I think one held, professionally held my interest because the factors that contribute to out of control sexual behavior are so varied, diverse.
Mhm.
But I also realized, like, therapists are terrible at talking about sex in general. So if
Yep.
I have an advantage here that, talking about sex does not make me blush at this point, and I feel like I can help folks by creating a safe space for them to talk about what shames them about sex or what they're struggling with regarding their sexual health. Uh, and I felt like there was some work that could be done in this area, and then I could be the one to do it.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. I love that. So you mentioned one book that was really
Yep.
influential to you. So I'd love to hear, do you have another one possibly that, is, has been really influential to
Yeah,
either your path
absolutely.
or currently, or?
Absolutely. The other one that I would add is The Erotic Mind by Jack Morin. I find that book, in a professional level, still influences my thinking, and you'll see it if you attend the conference in August or in October. Just understanding that the paradoxical nature of eroticism, the internal conflicts that people are going through, how it can differ from who they want to be versus who they are erotically, and how he organized it and thought about it, and without shame or stigma, really getting curious about people's erotic experiences, but also, I think, communicating the message that eroticism is a part of the human experience and
Mhm.
can be an ally in overall health and wellness. And I feel like that's still a revolutionary idea.
Yeah.
So the erotic mind, even though it's now, I think, published in the mid '90s, so it's still getting old, but I still feel like it's a kind of cornerstone of anyone's erotic education.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so you mentioned Jack Morin, and so I'm wondering, might you consider him your sexual role model, or do you have somebody else that might fit that bucket for you?
Well, he's definitely a professional role model, and I was fortunate enough to meet him before he passed away. Really sweet, smart,
Mhm.
brilliant person. To think about that, actually, when I knew this question was coming, it was more like I was looking into the world now. It's like, oh God, I don't know if this person is my sexual role model now, but I really wish he was when I was a kid. Like I wish
Okay.
he was around growing up, and that was Little Nas X, and watching what he's been doing on the world stage.
Hell
Oh
yes.
God, I
Hell
might not
yes.
have been such a sad sack if I had someone like that to look up to who was just so
Oh,
brazen about his sexuality,
yes.
enjoying himself.
Yes.
Not necessarily. I don't think he's necessarily doing it just to push the envelope. He just looks like he's having fun and like, this is who I am.
Totally.
And if you like it, great. And keep
Yeah.
it because he's awesome.
Yeah. He is absolutely awesome. That is a perfect answer to that. I love that. Uh, love that so much. So what are some of your more or most important everyday values?
It's an everyday value. Here, I think, and it's one that I strive for, and I don't always obtain, but it's kind of around kindness and kind of presumed goodness. Uh, there's so many times where it can be distracted and with just in my own head, and something happens, and it can have that quick reaction. But if I can hold on to that idea of presumed goodness and kindness, that I can approach other people in that manner, that I feel like I'm a better person. I feel like I can resolve conflicts better. I feel like my interactions with people are better. So that's something that I hold as a value. Don't always make it, particularly when driving. However, that is
I
something that
mean, driving in
I try.
DC,
Yeah,
that's
I try not to if I
yeah,
can. I'm just gonna walk. I'm just gonna
yeah, that can be understandable. I totally get that. Um,
walk.
okay, so what is some bad advice that you have heard people give out in our field?
Oh, here's a great question. Um, One, I was just shocked by this. That shame can be helpful for our clients. I find that I was appalled. And I think what they were trying to say was, people need to have levels of guilt, or they need to understand their internal conflicts, or maybe shame can help uh, improve someone's responsibility or accountability. And I was like, I think that is the wrong approach, flatly. Because shame is, one, is different than guilt, and two, shame, what we know from the literature, is demoralizing, it's demotivating, it's actually what people are defending against that creates a lot of the problems that we see in our office when working with out of control sexual behavior. Anytime we have any type of split within ourselves, then we're going to create these defenses that are really unhelpful and harmful in the long run. So that one I heard fairly recently that I was shocked. And then probably the one that goes back from the beginning, like I feel like this is such an old belief, but it still surfaces, and it's around folks who actively use drugs and alcohol. That you can't treat people who actively use or abuse, or even are would be considered dependent. That if they're you should wait until they stop using before you see them in psychotherapy. And I flatly disagree with that. I think you can work with anyone who is using, so you can be curious about what's going on. You meet them where they are, and you just tailor your interventions based on their readiness to change. But again, not to shame them for it, not to further stigmatize them, but you just create a space to get curious about what's happening. And you might find, one, it might not be terribly problematic for them, but two, if it becomes problematic, then you have this relationship that you can help them develop a different relationship with drugs and alcohol. There's sometimes a rigidity that if someone is using, then we look at it immediately through this addiction lens, and then we're like, oh no, you need to go to rehab, we need to refer you out. I'm like, oh no, we can still work with anything. We should be working with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I think with Little Nas, I feel like social media has played such a huge part in just like disseminating that information and like getting out to the world, kind of his gay agenda, as he said the other day.
I think he would actually agree with that.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering, Sexual Health Alliance utilizes social media to reach our members as well as find new sexuality content and research. And I'm wondering how you think social media has influenced our culture's sexuality.
I still think we're answering this question. I don't know if we know fully just yet. Just like any new technology, we're still adapting to it. New technologies don't typically come with an instruction manual on how to use it appropriately or responsibly or to be helpful for you in every day. And I know I feel like that embedded in this question, at least culturally, that I'm supposed to answer this in like on the negative. But I kind of just want to start in the positive, right? Because I feel like, particularly with sexual minorities, like social media can be very helpful in finding tribe and getting connected and being exposed to sexual expression that before the internet really have a hard time finding, or at least the bar to entry was much greater. But I also find that I worry that it's creating some distance. It can potentially fracturing communities in the sense that where are our common physical spaces that people are going to have relations to talk with people, to share a space. I know obviously pandemic sharing a space is much more risky, but I worry the impact that it's having on relationships. So I think I don't think it's I know you didn't ask if it was like all good or bad, but I always feel like there's a kind of that binary. So I feel like it's a mix, but we're also still trying to figure out how it is affecting us sexually and emotionally. So I'm kind of open to seeing where it goes.
Yeah. No, I like that. So kind of in that same regards, our team find podcasts, YouTube, other social media platforms, sometimes more educational and useful than traditional models, kind of talked about there's that space there, people that information kind of is digested every day. Do you think social media should have a place in formal training? And if so, how much?
God, I don't know how to answer that question. Because I don't even know what does that mean, formal training. And I mean, it's interesting, like how I've used it. I feel like it has democratized some information. Like I think more access to experts in diverse fields than I ever had before. So I've learned a lot from the experts that I've chatted with through social media. I mean, it's also difficult to wade through the content and making sure that it's trustworthy, that it is accurate. But for instance, I'm a huge podcast consumer, and when you find someone who's got the credentials and the ability to synthesize information and communicate it, I mean, it's so invaluable. At least that it has been for me. So that's one of the reasons why I'm providing in the OCSB training some podcasts that people can listen to, because I think it's just the conversations that are being had out there that just so much more approachable that I don't know how we would have been able to access that information prior to
Yeah.
tests being invented, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that networking connection you mentioned too, and is also so important. So did you just mention that you have your own podcast?
I did not.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I have been
On
consuming
consuming podcast. Okay.
doing
So then
podcasts.
what are your favorite podcasts to consume?
Oh, that's a great one. So right now, I've been doing. Oh, great. Okay, a couple. So what got me through the pandemic was You're Wrong About. I
Yes.
discovered at the beginning. So like I just went through their catalog and I was just
Yes.
I and how I accessed it. I don't know. It was their disco episode, which I don't know how it came into my feed, but I was
Yeah.
like, this is amazing. And so then I just started from the beginning, and it took me, the first 15 months of the pandemic of working
Love it.
out and listening to it and going on walks, and I got through their whole catalog. So You're Wrong About, fantastic. Uh,
Yes.
they only produce, I think, an episode once every 2 weeks, so it's kind of sad for me. But the other ones I listen to are things like Ezra Klein has a great interview podcast. Throughline
Mhm.
is excellent. Uh, and if I can put in a plug for, it's called Scene on Radio. It's scene as in a scene in a movie or a scene
Mhm.
in a
Mhm.
theater. And their episodes 2, 3, their seasons 2, 3, and 4 were on democracy, whiteness, as in what it means to be white in our country, and what it means to be man in our country.
Mhm.
So well done.
Okay. Say the name of that podcast one more time.
Scene on Radio.
Seen on Radio. Okay. I'll have to check that
2,
out.
3, and 4.
Okay. That's great. I love You're Wrong About. That was
So good.
such a good choice.
So good.
Love that one. Michael Hobbs, who does that, has another one, Maintenance Phase,
Yes.
which I also love. I just ordered Aubrey Gordon, who co-hosts that podcast with him, her book on what we don't talk about when we talk about fat. And so I'm super excited about that. Yeah.
And does Maintenance Phase, I know it talks a lot about body phobia and physical health. Do they talk about mental health and kind of, do they
Yes,
dip
it's
into
a
the
little,
wellness of it?
yeah, it's woven in to just like the diet culture and everything, and kind of like but it's not a mental health,
Got it.
podcast, but still such a great
It's on
listen.
my list. I need to check out.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple different ones that are just, I mean, just crazy. I mean, it's really crazy kind of what's really being pushed to you for in terms of vitamins and
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, and talk about the evils of social media. I mean, that's a marriage made in a very dark place.
Yes, yes. Oh man, yes. Okay, so so we talked about podcasts that you're listening to. Do you have any books that you're reading right now as well?
Sure. So 2 books I actually just finished. I finished, it's called Sinless Sex, and that is by William Staten.
Mm-hmm.
And he was basically almost like a capstone to his really impressive career, looking at sexuality through the lens of religion and religious values and thoughts. And he was pretty helpful in some of the thinking that went into my book, Treating Out of Control Sexual Behavior, when Doug and I were trying to frame the sexual health principles and kind of what are we talking about? What are the values that we're trying to promote here? And Bill Staten in his work was just describing the different sexual value systems in different religions. And I was like, oh my God, he's actually, this can be applied to the mental health values that we have, and that's when he was talking about act-centered value system. And in his book, he talks about relationship-centered, right? So it's either this sex act is healthy and unhealthy, or I should say for them, it's the sex act is sinful or good, or not sinful or good and bad. In the mental health world, it's healthy or not healthy. And we were trying to move the field away from that binary and talk about it more from an ethical standpoint. And he had laid out this thinking. It's like, oh, this is fantastic. So he just published this book, and it's just a great summary of his work and how to, I guess, how to have a kind of a healthy sexual expression in religious thought, right? And challenging some of the myths and misconceptions around sex and sexuality when it comes to the Bible and other religious texts. So that was number one. And then personally, this one was a little darker, but it was like a summer read. I was reading Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. So I was in my feels for some reason and wanted to read what he was talking about. And it's I mean, James Baldwin is obviously an amazing author and American treasure. So I recommend reading everything that he's produced. So this is one of the things that I had not read yet. So I finished that this summer.
Awesome. Okay. So what is your favorite form of self-care, especially like decompressing after a heavy session or a heavy work day? Your favorite form of self-care.
Yeah, the favorite form is it's going to sound boring, but it's really just exercise.
Okay.
So like if I do not regularly exercise, my mood will crater. So it's something that I do on the regular. But if it's like after a particularly heavy session or a session that really is not sitting well with me, my go-to is always to call a colleague or a friend. I have a variety of friends who are in the field. We are all available for these kind of de facto clinical consultation with each other, because this is not an easy job at times. And particularly during the pandemic, like I had a group of friends / therapists where we were just meeting weekly. It kind of became, it was informal, but just we kind of formalized it during the pandemic because we all knew we needed additional support and connection. So reaching out to folks is probably my PRN, so to speak. I need it most, but my routine, my regular self-care is always about exercise. I was never one to pull all-nighters in college. I didn't think I did that once, and I'm like, I am never doing that again. I will be late. I'll get nope. So
I understand that. I totally understand that. Also a big fan of sleep myself. Okay, so looking over your previous workshops, you're very passionate about teaching and sharing knowledge. And so what is your favorite part about, doing these workshops? What do you look forward to, during that time the most?
Yeah, I know this is going to be completely selfish, but here it is. I love the performing aspect of it. Like I enjoy getting up and communicating and being creative and being fun and funny, if I can possibly be that way. I used to do theater when I was a young lad, and this is kind of the only kind of performing element that I have left in my life, which is also one of the reasons why the moving everything to an online format has been so saddening for me, because I could really struggle to find, I was like, how do I access that piece to my enjoyment of presenting and teaching? The kind of the being on stage piece. I know, I think the real answer is supposed to be like, I like expanding people's minds and challenging them and blah, 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 blah. All that's true. And I just enjoy getting up and talking and being a fool and making silly jokes and
tapping into those theater kid roots. I think that's wonderful. I love that. What are 3 items on your bucket list?
I saw that question and I don't like that question.
Nope. Okay.
No, it's okay. Like, because I was like, I don't think I have anything anymore. Because I'm middle-aged now, and I've done things already. I like a little adventure vacation. So I've hiked the Grand Canyon, or I've driven cross country, and I've camped and blah, and I've gone places. I wrote a book, which was on my book. I think what that question is done for me, I was like, I think I need to rewrite my bucket list because I've done some things. But I also don't know how ambitious I am either. Like I have no desire to go launch into space, and I have no desire to go scuba diving or something. So it's like, what? And I was just about to say, what is left? And I was like, oh, that's dramatic. But it kind of feels like, what else do I need to do? So it's less about
drama kid.
I know, right? I was like, oh my goodness. So it's less about I think one piece, and it's just more about continuing to live my life and doing
Yeah.
things that I enjoy. So like to continue to go on like adventure vacations and
Okay.
continue to
So
travel in ways.
where would be the next like favorite destination for an adventure vacation?
There seems to like there's some, well, one, I have not seen enough of this country as far as national parks and kind of the hiking
Yeah.
that's available here. So I don't want to lose sight of that. But also, much of my travel has been in Europe. So I would love to get to South America and do some hiking and traveling and
Yes.
in the sense of what that
Love
continent
that.
has
I
to
love
share.
that.
It looks beautiful and amazing.
Yeah. I think doing kind of like a tour of all of the national parks, even just in the United States, like, or I mean, yes, the national parks in the United States, but I mean, tour everywhere, but really like, I mean, that's always been one of my big bucket list items, just because there are so many beautiful
So
parks.
many.
So many. Yeah. I'm in Texas, so Big Ben is a big one that I love so much. Not a super close drive, but that's a good one to check out, definitely. As long as it's not in the summer, the Texas heat of the summer.
Yeah, I'm delicate. I don't want to do
that. Okay. What are two of the most important things that you do every day? You mentioned exercise and sleep. Could you give me another one?
Well, I definitely don't exercise every day, but I definitely make sure my sleeping. Like I'm so boring. I've become like a really boring middle-aged man. The other piece is to just routinize eating, because I will get so hungry and I can't concentrate and like just want to nap. And I was just like, so regulating. Like I feel like everything is to regulate my energy level. So I have to make sure I sleep well. I have to exercise throughout the week, and I just have to make sure I'm eating regularly and well. Because if any of that is disrupted, I'm a mess.
Oh, I understand that. I mean,
I'm a bit rich, and it's like time for lunch. So it's just making sure some of those basic needs are all there, because to me that's so connected to kind of your biological foundation of your overall health, right? So if I knock one of those pillars out, I'm just like,
absolutely.
I get hangry, and I can just all of that.
When you get hangry, what's the first thing that you want to reach for?
Oh my God, it's pretty much anything at that point. Just trying to think. I'm like looking in my kitchen. It's like, what would it be when I'm hangry? But if I'm at that point, it's probably I need something substantial, like something like Cliff Bars or something that's kind of like that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be like I try to have fruit around me at all times, because it's like a quick pickup, and then it can move. But testament to how I structure my life, I rarely get hangry because
there you go. There you go.
Eating and taking time to eat. And I'm like,
yeah. No, I love that.
I'm a miserable person when I'm hangry.
Okay. Can you share?
It goes back to that kindness piece. I was like, I would not get to that kindness value.
Totally. Oh, totally. Can you share what a piece of a sexual health plan may look like and how you help clients adhere to their SHP boundaries?
Sure. Well, a sexual health plan is kind of a combination of the client's vision of sexual health along with what we determined was their clinical picture from the assessment. So we kind of marry their motivation for change, kind of what they're moving toward, with some of the factors that we may have identified that are hindering their ability to achieve that goal. So we try to get something down on paper so we can clarify, so we both know what the person is moving toward. And so the sexual plan is divided into 3 columns. You have the boundaries, you have what we consider health, and then things that might be ambivalent, that they're not necessarily sure that they want to change. So the boundary pieces are typically worded in that I want to stop doing this thing. And how we set it up is they agree to, 1, it's only what they feel ready to discontinue. And then 2, they agree that they're going to follow this and then disclose if they cross this boundary at their next individual or group session. So I find just that accountability component alone kind of shifts what I call like the formula, what feels rational in the moment, because then they're like, oh, if I do this thing, I'm going to have to talk about it in group and explore it and understand it. And sometimes it's just enough of a pause for people to be like, let me just wait, right? And so And I remind folks, like, remember, this plan doesn't come from me. This is what you developed. This is from your motivation, from your investment in therapy. If you want to change it, that's fine. Let's do that. But you at one point wanted to make this commitment, and let's get
Mhm.
curious about why and what you want to do about this. And then we can, if they continue to cross it, maybe we need to reevaluate the commitment, or it's just something that has been a struggle. It's going to take some time for them to kind of rewrite the ship or develop new habits around their sexual depression. So sometimes it just takes a little time. But I find that just in the beginning of the process of clarifying what it is they want to discontinue and achieve, and then that accountability component of understanding is like, all right, if I want to do this thing, I made this commitment to Michael and the group, I'll tell them, and it kind of slows them down a bit. But it also lets me know how they relate to commitments in their life,
Mhm.
in themselves or relationship commitments. So if they start deploying defenses like they're withholding or they're being dishonest,
Mhm.
I don't get mad about that. I actually get excited. I'm like, wow, you're bringing that symptom to the room. Let's be curious about that. Tell me what
Yeah.
happened that you thought that withholding or being dishonest was the solution to whatever bind you're in. Let's look at that. And so it becomes a what do we want to say, like an element that brings in the discussions in therapy, kind of, I was using the grist for the mill. It's like such a weird metaphor, but it it creates that controlled tension in that therapeutic conflict
Yeah.
that we can start having conversations about how they relate to themselves, how they relate to people.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that, like, changing that mindset to look at it in an exciting way and, you
Hmm.
know, allow that to be a way to, continue the conversation and stuff. I think
Yeah,
that's amazing.
moment to
Um,
get curious.
yeah. Uh, okay. So can you give us a small glimpse of the importance of integrating and acknowledging out of control sexual behavior as opposed to sexual addiction or sex
Sure. It's
addiction?
yeah, I mean, it's a huge question. The one thing I can do is just take your question literally, right? And understand what the intention is with calling something out of control, out of control versus sex addiction, right?
Mhm.
The objective of that phrase is really just to move the field away from using language that implies a disorder or diagnosis, like kind of moving it away from a disease model that hasn't been established in literature that I argue in the book, and when I teach on this, is
Mhm.
potentially in what we call an iatrogenic injury, right? It's an injury that's inserted by the provider for them to have to adapt to and identify with and think of themselves as having a disorder or disease that's attached to their sexuality versus a phrase like out of control sexual behavior, which is just meant to be descriptive. It's non-diagnostic, and how I use it is more subjective, right? The person feels out of control, and it's up to us to understand the factors that contribute to them feeling out of control, because they're not going to be homogeneous, right? They're going to be pretty diverse and unique to the person.
Mhm.
So it's just meant to be like a stepping stone. So
Mhm.
we don't insert a disease narrative where one doesn't exist, because that can also obscure our curiosity about what has been happening for the client. So
Absolutely.
I just use that phrase as a way to kind of allow us to keep us moving without getting tripped up on
Yeah.
that disease model that
Yeah.
research hasn't shown to be applicable here.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely perfect. I think, yeah, and I think that's so important to really acknowledge the way our words carry so much meaning, and
Hmm.
yeah,
And
there's so much
how
out
we
there.
frame and conceptualize this
Exactly.
issue is important because it influences
Exactly.
treatment planning and influences our interventions. So I usually people want to go to the interventions and I want to back them up. I was like, we have to first look at our thinking before we talk about
Exactly.
how to intervene.
Yeah. Um, awesome. Okay. So I have one more question for
Yeah.
you. And I would love if you could tell us like what you're currently working on. What would you like everyone to know and check out? And
Hmm.
yeah, what's
Yeah.
on the
Well,
agenda?
I mentioned one of the things I'm currently working on, which is the trial for the sexual and gender
Mhm.
diversity learning community that we're in the throes of through University of Maryland Prevention Research Center. So I'm super excited to bring that project to a close and kind of see what comes out of that data. So that's number one, and then number two is the problems problem sexual behavior certification program that I'm doing with SHA and David Lay that is launching in November. that I'm super, super excited about.
So excited.
I've been connecting with professionals in the field. It's such an opportunity to elevate all the important voices in this area of sex therapy, uh,
Yes.
and then bringing them to the hungry minds of SHA
Yes.
students. I'm super excited about that.
Absolutely. I am also so excited about that. Um, so thank you so much, Michael. This has been wonderful. And yes, absolutely. Problem sexual behavior with you and with Dr. David Lay starting in November, as well as your conference with us with Sexual Health Alliance in October 2nd and October 3rd. We're so excited to welcome you to Sexual Health Alliance to start talking about more of this. Give us a brief overview into what problem sexual behavior program itself is going to look like. Both things so excited for. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.